Okay, welcome back to the leadership track, and we are spending some more time with Martin Palethorpe. Martin, good to see you again.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk today about something that you've kind of introduced to me, this concept of conscious leadership. I think it'll be a fascinating session, and I guess maybe you can start by maybe setting out for us. What do you think is the purpose of this session for our participants? What they're going to learn today? How's it going to kind of shape up?
So the purpose of this session is to have the participants reflect on their own leadership.
Okay.
Reflect and take some time. I'm going to share some models and some ideas, but really the primary purpose is for them to take a little bit of time out to go, how am I doing on how I'm leading myself, my business, and wider?
Okay, so multiple facets, if you like, to it. It's not just what people think about leadership as being singularly dimensioned. It's got multiple aspects of it. So, okay, you're going to share some of those things. That'd be useful. So, obviously, people are concerned all the time about then. What does that then? How does that relate to the business issues that they might be dealing with? So, can you tell me some of the business issues that you see related to leadership in this context?
Yeah, sure. I'm just gonna share my screen here,
Okay,
Phil, and
great.
go through a couple of models that I think might be useful. And the first one is this, which is really about high performance environments. And in the middle, you'll see there what we call the tensions of leadership. And the tensions of leadership that is that the leader has to think about the short term, the current down the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
but they also obviously have to think about the future and the longer term.
Yeah,
One of the tensions to manage those two. And then the other tension is that they need to focus on internal things, but also they need to focus externally on their stakeholders, the competition, the customer, etc.
sure. Okay, makes sense.
And so what you see is here four quadrants. So it's very easy to get sucked into bottom right, into achievement.
Mm-hmm.
It's short term. I need to hit revenue.
Yeah.
I need to please the client. I need to act, and we need to drive results.
And I guess, coming out of the pandemic we've been in recently, that's been very much in people's focus, right? How do I keep everything with the lights on? How do I keep doing what I need to do in order to be continuing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But of course, there are these other quadrants that are equally important. So especially as the leader is growing the organization, how do they put the processes, the structure in place to enable the growth to be smooth and easy and enable the organization to function?
Sure. Okay, makes sense.
And then there's the top, right, which is more about the future, which, so for example, innovation. Okay, you cannot do that in the short term and be fine. But of course, with the way the world is changing and the market's changing, there's a constant need to be looking ahead for them and for their clients to be innovating.
Sure, of course.
So critical to have space and time and a culture that enables innovation.
Sure.
And
Okay.
then the fourth quadrant, which is an increasingly critical one, with is well-being.
Mm-hmm.
The well-being of the leader themselves, the well-being of all people in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And what one of the tensions of leadership is, how do you balance all these four? It's very easy to get sucked into bottom right, into achievement, drive. But without this balanced focus, the organization falls down, or the people do, and they can't cope, or they leave, or they get disillusioned.
And when you've been working with, agency leaders across your portfolio clients, do people tend to spend the predominance of their time in one of these quadrants and occasionally dip out into the other ones, or do people tend to get that balance right? Martin?
Yes, I'm back.
Oh, right. Okay. We're gonna have to
Sorry.
start that again.
Well, unless we just, yeah, okay, it's up to you.
Sorry.
I think we can edit it, but
Yeah.
I could edit it for you
Oh,
even.
you can edit it. Okay, I can't. Okay, do you want to pick it up then? Where do you want to pick it up from?
Yeah.
Did you get my question?
Yeah. What? Yeah. Ask me your question.
Okay. So when you're working with the clients you're working with, Martin, do you tend to find that people are dominant in one of these quadrants and may just dip in and out of the other ones, or do they tend to get that spread right first time of asking? What do you find?
Well, the predominant one is the focus bottom right. Is focus on results. Because obviously that's important. Generation of revenue, satisfaction of customer. Very easy to get sucked into the busyness and the short term of bottom right, and to not, to let go of the other three.
And do you find that people understand when you say innovation, it's not just about technical innovation, which I think a lot of people think of. It's innovation in the way in which you operate your business, the way in which you lead. It's more than just kind of technology, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's any form of questioning and challenging how you think and coming up with better ways of doing things.
Okay, good. And then obviously the well-being side at the moment is one that's really in focus for everybody. But that's more than just how's everybody feeling. It's more about, and I think a lot of agencies think that by having the fun side of their agency, having a social committee and that sort of stuff, that's naturally gonna come. It's a bit more deep than that, isn't it?
It's a massive area, really. And what leaders often tend to do is they try and tend to tick it with a box. Well, we're providing a confidential counselor to anyone that wants it, or we're giving them a day off, or it can become a tick box exercise. It's critical. It's a whole massive field of how do you develop a culture that really works, and well-being is a part of that. But it's an effective, high-performing environment and a team that's working well together. So it's a big area.
Okay, good. Okay, so is there anything else you wanted to share at this point, or can I
Yeah.
move on to
So
my
I'm
next
going to
question?
share another model, Phil,
Sure. Okay, go on.
which I just want to introduce to our participants to really think about leadership in a different way. And this is called Barrett Values model. So let me just click over to this. So really, the other thing for leaders to think about, and this is a culture assessment tool actually, but really it's saying for an organization to be effective, it has to be effective at all 7 of these levels. So really important for leaders to think about this, right? So at level 1, of course, we need to have viability, financial viability, primarily financial viability, but also health and well-being. It fits in here, health and safety primarily. So making sure that we've got enough to be viable as a business.
Yeah, so we've got to pay the wages, we've got to be able to pay the bills and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, makes sense. Okay.
Level 2, we've got to have healthy relationships internally and externally. Level 3, we've got to put the systems in place. This comes back to the last slide around processes, results focus, striving for excellence, performance, productivity. Now, what can happen is we have so much focus on level 1 and level 3. So we're driving to achieve results, and we're putting as much focus as we can on performance at level 3 to enable level 1. And what then can happen very easily is we end up with what we call dysfunction, or entropy is the formal term. And entropy is dysfunction in a culture. And this shows up as being over controlling, or being manipulative, or negative relationship dynamics of blame or defensiveness or gossip or politics, people working too many long hours, too much hierarchy being put in place, etc. So the first thing is, how do we as leaders develop a healthy focus at level 1, 2, and 3, and then evolve beyond that? So at level 4 and 5, we're about creating an environment that is focused on learning and growing and improving and innovating. Creating at level 5 a culture that has really great values around honesty and openness and trust and integrity and so on. And then at the highest levels, level 6 is really a higher level version of 2. So it's about not just about good relationships, but real collaboration and partnership, internally, with members on the leadership team, but also with customers and with the market even. And then at the highest level, level 7, how do we create a business that has got vision, is thinking about what's really going on in the world and in society and in community, and has some level of responsibility and is being of service in the way it's going about its business.
Okay. So I guess, so I've seen manifestations of that in terms of, we've got the B Corp type approach now to business, which is very much in that level 7 area, isn't it?
Well, yes, and really the B Corporation whole movement is really about all 7 of these levels, right? Yes, there's quite a strong focus at level 6 and 7, but it's more than that. And what we're saying with this model is we're not saying you should only focus at level 6 and 7. Level 1, financial viability and performance at level 3 is of course critical. So what we're looking
because
for,
you can't possibly get into those levels at the top unless you are viable and you can continue
correct,
as a function. Right, understand.
correct. But actually what we're also saying is, in today's world, a leader leading just from and creating a culture just from level 3 and level 1 is missing a trick, because the world is demanding things at these higher levels now. The world is demanding transparency and honesty and integrity and social responsibility and environmental responsibility and so on.
Sure. Okay.
And this then, of course, flows into leadership. This is about culture, but it really then flows into how a leader is leading the strategy of their business, but how they're leading in who they are as a leader.
Okay, as an individual, or as how they are as the leader of that business?
Yes.
Or both?
Both.
Okay, I understand. Just one question before we move off this model, Mont. I'm intrigued by it. I mean, everywhere I go and talk to clients, often clients will have what they call their values, and they've got their values. They're often written on a wall or whatever. And at level 5, that they're the sorts of words I often see. I guess that there's a difference though between having the words on the wall and actually living them. And I guess that would be the challenge, right?
Yeah, this is a really, really important point. And there's values on the wall and there's values in use. And it's really important to live values. And that really that's got to come from the leader. But there's got to be mechanisms to assess to what extent this is how we use this model actually, but to what extent the values on the wall are actually being lived in the culture. And it's an important journey to go on to make sure that people are living those values. Otherwise people get really disillusioned about the culture, and there's no integrity in that.
Yeah, and I've seen divisiveness come through that way. Some people are trying to live the values, and other people clearly aren't. And before you know it, then becomes divisive culture and not collaborative. The other thing I guess that strikes me is, I mean, in the past one, I've done work in this area where I was intrigued to see the amount of performance uplift that can come from positive culture. People talk about culture being a real thing that they're focused on, but actually, do you think most leaders recognize what the level of upside that can come from working to get the culture in the right place?
That's a great question. It's a really good question, and I think it's changing over the last 20 years because we're realizing, it's called the softer side of things, the people side of things. Historically, it's had a really bad name because people see it as soft and fluffy and intangible. But of course, culture and mindset is the most impactful element, because what we're looking to do is how do we energize our employees? How do we get the most out of them? How do we motivate them? How do we engage them to give their discretionary effort to the cause? And the more inspired they are, the more excited, the more aligned people are in how they're working, the more teams perform.
Yeah, I see that. I've got agencies where they've got a really positive culture and they're really kind of on the up, and everyone's excited, and the discretionary effort comes flying through. Things that are seen as a barrier in other agencies are not seen as barriers. They're just things that people just get on with and overcome. So I definitely can see the upside from getting that positivity right through that culture.
Yes, and the other thing that is fundamental is how it feels to be part of an organization like that, right? Of course, there's the tangible impact that has on results, but the joy of being part of a high-performing team or an amazing culture, the joy that the individual leaders get compared to when it's the opposite. I'm sure many of people listening to this will have been in those two environments, one where they're flying and it's great to be part of, and another where actually it's draining, it's political, there's lack of trust, etc. And it's hard work to show up to work every day in that way.
Yeah. Okay, I think if we're done with that model, Martin, I think it segues nicely into my next question, which is, okay, so this to me feels very much about having to have very, shall we say, conscious thought about what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be leading our businesses. And that links to my question about, tell me, when you give me the title conscious leadership, what exactly do you mean specifically about that?
Right, great. And so let's dissect that, right? So first of all, the word conscious. So being conscious, what do I mean by being conscious? I mean being aware. And so being aware is being aware of all our thoughts and our feelings, being aware of our conditioned thinking, our limiting beliefs that we've got. A lot of this is going on deep down subconsciously. If I'm not aware of my conditioned thinking and my limiting beliefs, then it holds me back in how I do things. Aware of where I'm gripped by my ego.
Okay.
Aware of where I might not have the full picture. I can get very immersed in the way I see the world, but actually realizing that I'm being aware that I may not have all the information. Aware of how I'm judging others. Aware of my impact on others, of my impact on the client, aware of the business's impact on the planet. And so first thing is, the more aware we can become, the more we can then actually choose something differently. When we're not aware, we're stuck doing things the way we've always done them.
Okay, so it's interesting. So I was coaching one of my clients the other day around his own styles, the way in which he leads his business, and he wasn't really aware that there are multiple different leadership styles, and therefore he just gave what he gave, and pretty much people got what they got. And when I got him to try and expand that a bit and think about, are you giving the right leadership to the people in the way that they need it? He actually concluded he probably wasn't. And therefore he's become aware of the fact that there are some times where he's not providing the leadership that people need. He's providing the leadership that he wants to give in that moment. And I guess that can be problematic over time, can't it? If we're dealing with bigger and bigger groups of people.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And there's so many blind spots like that, Phil, especially when we are busy. When we're running at 100 miles an hour, it's like we're on the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And when we're on that, it's like driving along at a very fast speed and forgetting to look in your wing mirror, right? Well, even when you look in your wing mirror, there's still a blind spot. And it's being aware of all those blind spots we have enable us to be better and lead better.
Okay. And I guess the thing is in this, it's not just about being more affable, is it? It's about using the right style to get the right results. And it might be that sometimes, you may have to take a coaching leadership position, or you might have to take a democratic one, or you may in some cases have to be directive, right? It's not necessarily about just being affable and nice to people. It's about giving the leadership in that moment that's required.
Correct. Yes. And none of this conversation, I mean, even though I'm talking about things like well-being and culture and values, this is not about just being, nice.
Yeah.
And having lots of lovely things in the organizations like a pool table and, days off and, duvet days or whatever. It's not about that.
Yeah.
It's about how to lead an organization brilliantly, which is a healthy and a high-performing one. And that requires different leadership styles. So let me just come on and talk about 4 areas that people might want to think about when we talk about leadership.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So the first one is leading self.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is leading others. The third one is leading your organization. And the fourth one is leading in society.
Okay.
So the first one, leading self, right? Actually, leading self is a critical element. How do I master my own self? And this looks at things like the level of regard I have for myself. Am I arrogant? And am I looking through everything through an arrogant, judgmental lens? Am I lacking confidence, so I feel like an imposter?
Yeah.
then that flows into all sorts of areas. How resilient am I as a leader?
Mm-hmm.
How authentic am I as a leader? Am I putting on a mask? Am I showing up a certain way because I think I need to?
Mm-hmm.
How authentic and vulnerable can I be? How good am I at being strong in my leadership style when I need to?
Mm-hmm.
How good am I at getting clear on decisions that need to be made?
Mm-hmm.
And how bold am I? So am I being bold? Am I really inspiring the organization to get out of its perhaps limiting way of working to aim for the sky? So there's just to name a few, but leading self is a fundamental element to start off with.
It's interesting you bring it up, and you mentioned confidence in that, because in my experience of this, working with agency leaders is, especially when they're on the up and up and they're coming up as a business, their confidence when they were doing it in the way they started out was reasonably high. As they start to get new experiences and they have to deal with new things they haven't dealt with before, the confidence starts to wane a little bit, and then actually that becomes a limiting factor for them, because they're starting to have this imposter syndrome going on in their mind, and they're saying, I'm not sure I can do that, and therefore they might retract a little bit, or they might constrain their thinking. And often we find that constrained thinking is becoming a large limiting factor for the way in which their business is going to develop. So I think confidence is a massive part of that when you're leading a business, and as that business grows, your confidence has to grow with it. Would you agree?
I totally agree, and this is confidence is at every and any level, but that's why the other video we've done, recently, mindset is everything, is so important, because confidence is about the way we think about ourselves.
Yeah, but I think that lack of self manifest in so many different ways. It can manifest in real mechanistic things like, oh, we don't think we can ask the customer for that price point, or we don't think that that our content will be strong enough, or whatever, and that comes from the top down in an organization, then starts to paralyze the lower parts of the organization too.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay.
It's a fundamental area, and yeah, and we confidence is really important,
Mm-hmm.
and some people will mask that by being overconfident.
Yeah.
And so there's this sort of all sorts of levels of confidence, of how do we be confident, but how do we do it in an authentic, vulnerable way,
Mm-hmm.
not a mask that we develop just to show that we're strong.
Yeah, I get you. Okay. So what about the other areas then? You talked about the other areas of that.
So then there's leading others,
Mm-hmm.
right? What we might call relationship mastery.
Mm-hmm.
How do we lead others in our organization? And so there's many elements to this. How do we listen? How do we listen and really understand? Sounds simple, absolutely fundamental, and often missed. Do we know what's really going on in the minds of our people? Do we really understand where they're coming from? And this could be just in a specific meeting, or it could be generally, how are they doing right now?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's various elements of this, which is around then how do we manage people? So how do we empower them? Are they feeling empowered? Are they being well managed? Are you developing them? Are you supporting them? But also, are you challenging them?
Mm-hmm.
So again, this isn't just about being nice.
Yeah.
It's balancing supportive,
Mm-hmm.
empowering, developing focus with challenge and inspiration.
And in my experience, Martin, I see a lot of the challenge side and not as much development and inspiring.
Yes.
The first budgets that always get pared back are the development budgets. And because the workload is high, everyone says, "Oh, we've got no time to develop," so therefore they just kind of hold on and hope that everything is okay. And I think you're right. If you're creating an inspiring culture, you've got to invest in the people. You've got to make sure they're developing as individuals and they're getting that satisfaction from their career, right?
Right. Yeah, and it's a brilliant point. So what I say is that an organization can only develop at the speed that its people do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're growing and you want to grow as an organization, you want to grow your results,
Mm-hmm.
then your people have to grow in their ability and their confidence and all elements,
Mm-hmm.
enabled to be better next year than they were today.
And as a leader, it's not acceptable to just expect them to do that on their own accord.
No.
Absolutely.
if we're not focused on development, that at some point people reach, including the leaders, reached what we call the highest level of incompetence. They get to a point where eventually they become incompetent because what they need to do, next year is going to be more developed from what they do today. So we have to develop. And if we don't, then what we end up doing is the costly process of getting rid of lots of people and hiring new people. And if you look at people's recruitment bill, it becomes exorbitant, but actually could not necessarily be that.
It's interesting, because when I was leading our agency, when we did this, we were really good at bringing talent through the bottom of the business and helping them develop, and then putting through development paths. So then we had a ready-made workforce of very talented people. We didn't have to kind of hire in the Galacticos type people at the top end that cost us a huge amount of money, and therefore that allowed us to do things in our business that other people couldn't do. So yeah, I'm a big advocate of bringing talent through the business and developing them to make your business stronger.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's about getting the most out of people, and there's something also that fundamentally, if we're just replacing people all the time, sometimes organizations just suddenly get rid of people, and before you know it, they've gone, and and they keep replacing, and well, what it does is it creates a culture of fear at some level. There's fear and there's a lack of trust.
Yeah, exactly.
People feel like they are disposable.
Okay, so you're talking there about people and the organization structure. So you mentioned organization. When you talk about leading the organization, what's in that category then?
So this is the leader thinking about the vision, the goals, and the strategy. Have I got a vision, goals, and a strategy? And is it inspiring? Is it inspiring to me, the leader? But is it also inspiring to people in the organization? And is it aligning? Are we all aligned on it? You often get, one of the issues here is, well, it's not clear in the first place, or it doesn't inspire, or those people are excited by it, but these people have forgotten it. It's on the wall, and actually, we came up with it a year ago, and we're not even using it now.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I mean, if you look at some of the world's most successful businesses, typically they've got an inspirational vision of where they're going, and they've normally got inspirational leadership that are taking them there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing I notice is that I find with agency leaders is often they're so busy working in the business, they take very little time to work on the business. They don't think about the longer term strategy in the future. They don't raise their vision and look forward. They're in the now, and it's do the stuff in today. And then they may look 90 days ahead, but they're certainly not looking to the next year or the year after. And therefore they're limited by their range of vision, if you like.
Yeah, and that is one of the tensions, going back to one of the first slide actually we showed. The tension is focusing so bottom right on achievement that we don't stop, come off the hamster wheel and question and think a bit longer term. And certainly goal strategy is one part of that. The other part of that is leading organization is about the environment and the culture. How do we strategically, cleverly, consciously develop an environment and a culture that is going to maximize performance, well-being, and everything else?
Sure. And then you mentioned the last piece, which is the bit that I think fascinates me the most at the moment, about your impact that you're having in the wider world, rather than just what you're doing in your micro world. So help me understand a bit more about that.
Yeah. Now, if you look at the way the world is today, it's like the world is demanding different values from us in how we live, right? It's demanding that we have more compassion, have more transparency, are more responsible. Look at the whole wave around the climate, right now, which is not going to go away. How do we start to be more responsible about the policies we've got in our business, in the way that we individually lead our lives? How do we be environmentally, socially responsible? How do we have kindness in how we do it? So there's some critical values that are fundamental, and what the world actually needs is it needs leaders of any organization, and all of us actually as individual leaders of ourselves to start to step up and lead and live in a more holistic, considered, conscious way.
I think I understand that, and I think what I'm hearing from a lot of leaders is that they're worried that it's a softening of kind of wanting to drive business performance. They see it as, if I get all about, if I become very environmental, or I become all about culture, that somehow that weakens their position in terms of their leadership. What would be your answer back on that one?
Well, I'd say I mean it is a challenge, right? Because it's almost another thing to do on the list, right? Really, coming back to my previous slide, we want to just be able to focus at level 1, level 3, and drive some profit and sell our business or whatever else.
Yeah.
I'd say that's not good enough in today's world. I'd say that actually, I think there's two ways of looking at this. So on one level, look deep into yourself as to what feels right in today's world about how you lead. But I'd also suggest to you there's a business opportunity to be a more clever, more rounded organization today. Because clients want to deal, there is a movement, a big movement. People want to join a more holistic organization, and they want to do business with a more holistic organization.
So do you think it might become a prerequisite in time to doing business?
I think so, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Look, I'm conscious we're coming towards the end of the session. So from what we've discussed today, Martin, what would you want the participants to be able to do from here? What would you want them to think about? What would you want them to focus on?
I'd like them to take time to reflect on everything that we have covered here. Hopefully, this is a time for them to stop and reflect on their own leadership. And so I'd invite them to do that and to increasingly on a daily, weekly basis, think about how aware they are. How aware are they in each of the categories we've described about, and how consciously then and cleverly are they leading in all of these areas? Invite them to ask that and to make changes accordingly.
Okay, that's great. Well, Martin, thank you once again. I think that's been fascinating. I'm sure the guys who are listening will enjoy it too. And let's see where we go from here. So thanks again, Martin. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.